Hey there, welcome back to Sleep with Dragon Ball Lore. Tonight, we're diving into one of the most complex, compelling, and utterly transformative character journeys in anime history. This is the story of a prince without a kingdom, a warrior without a home, a man who spent decades fighting against his own heart. This is the story of Vegeta, the legendary Saiyan Prince. And trust me when I say his journey is one worth experiencing in every vivid emotional detail. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this deep dive into Dragon Ball lore, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, get comfortable, maybe dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into this epic journey together. Vegeta's story isn't just about power levels and epic battles, though there are plenty of those. It's about pride and pain, arrogance and growth, loneliness and love. It's about a man who started as one of the most ruthless villains in Dragon Ball history and slowly, painfully, beautifully transformed into one of its greatest heroes. He never lost his edge, never became soft or sentimental in the traditional sense. But he found something he never thought he needed: a reason to fight beyond himself. From the moment we first meet him, standing on a distant planet with his partner Nappa, Vegeta commands attention. He's cold, calculating, merciless. He crushes planets for a living, serves a tyrant he secretly despises, and carries himself with an arrogance that seems almost justified by his sheer power. But beneath that hard exterior lies a trauma so deep, a pain so profound, that it would take decades and countless battles for him to even begin to confront it. This is the story of how a prince became a slave, how a slave became a warrior, and how a warrior finally, after so much suffering, became a man. This is Vegeta's journey, and it begins long before he ever set foot on Earth, in a place that no longer exists, on a world that was erased from the universe by an act of genocide so complete that only a handful of its people survived. This is where we must start, with the birth of a prince on a doomed planet called Vegeta. In the year age 732, on a planet named after his own royal bloodline, a child was born who would one day become one of the universe's most formidable warriors. His name was Vegeta, fourth of his name, son of King Vegeta, Prince of all Saiyans. From the moment he drew his first breath, expectations were placed upon his small shoulders that would have crushed most children. But Vegeta was no ordinary child. He was born with a power level that far exceeded the average Saiyan warrior, a natural prodigy whose potential was recognized immediately by everyone around him. Planet Vegeta was a harsh world, a planet of warriors where strength was the only currency that mattered. The Saiyans were an extraterrestrial race of brutal efficiency, a people who had evolved for one purpose: combat. They were conquerors by nature, planet brokers who would descend upon worlds, wipe out their inhabitants, and sell the real estate to the highest bidder. It was a brutal existence, but it was the only one the Saiyans knew. They took pride in their savagery, in their power, in their ability to transform into massive, ape-like creatures called Usaru, when exposed to the light of a full moon, multiplying their already fearsome strength tenfold. Young Vegeta grew up in the royal palace, surrounded by the trappings of power, but also by the constant pressure to prove himself worthy of his birthright. His father, King Vegeta, was a proud and powerful ruler, but he was also a man who understood the precarious position his people were in. You see, the Saiyans, for all their strength and ferocity, were not the masters of their own destiny. They served a far more powerful being, an intergalactic tyrant whose cruelty and strength made even the most hardened Saiyan warrior tremble. His name was Frieza. Frieza was the emperor of the universe, or at least that's what he called himself. He commanded a massive military force known as the Frieza Force, and he had brought the Saiyans under his control through a combination of overwhelming power and calculated manipulation. The Saiyans worked for Frieza, conquering planets on his behalf, and in return, Frieza allowed them to continue existing. It was not a partnership, it was subjugation. The Saiyans were little more than attack dogs on a leash, and Frieza held that leash with an iron grip. King Vegeta despised this arrangement. He was a king in name only, a ruler without true sovereignty. Every order he gave could be countermanded by Frieza. Every decision he made was subject to the tyrant's approval. And perhaps most humiliating of all, Frieza had taken a special interest in King Vegeta's son. The young prince, with his exceptional power and potential, had caught Frieza's attention, and the emperor demanded that the boy be brought to him to serve in his personal forces. King Vegeta had no choice but to comply. So, young Vegeta, barely more than a child, was torn from his home and forced into service. He became a soldier in Frieza's army, sent on missions to conquer and destroy, to kill without question or mercy. For a Saiyan, combat was natural, even enjoyable, but there was no joy in slavery. Vegeta learned very quickly that despite his royal blood, despite his incredible power, he was nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded at Frieza's whim. The Emperor never let him forget it either. Frieza took a perverse pleasure in keeping the Saiyan Prince close, not out of affection, but as a symbol of his complete dominance over the Saiyan race. The relationship between young Vegeta and Frieza was complex and deeply psychologically damaging. Frieza saw potential in the boy and cultivated it, but always with the understanding that Vegeta belonged to him. There was a twisted, almost parental quality to their interactions, with Frieza sometimes praising the young prince's accomplishments while simultaneously reminding him of his place. It was a form of psychological control that would leave scars far deeper than any physical wound. Vegeta was not alone in his servitude, however. He was accompanied by other Saiyan warriors, most notably Nappa, a hulking elite warrior who had served King Vegeta loyally, and Raditz, the elder brother of a low-class Saiyan warrior named Kakarot. These three formed a small unit within the Frieza Force, carrying out the Emperor's orders across the galaxy. For Nappa and Raditz, there was a certain acceptance of their situation. They were warriors, and warriors followed orders. But for Vegeta, every mission was a reminder of what he had lost, of the throne that should have been his, of the father and planet that were stolen from him. And stolen they were, though young Vegeta didn't know it yet. As he grew older and stronger, as he carved out a reputation as one of Frieza's most capable and ruthless soldiers, events were unfolding that would change his life forever. King Vegeta, tired of living under Frieza's thumb, had begun to plot rebellion. He gathered a group of loyal Saiyan warriors and launched a desperate attack on Frieza's ship, hoping to kill the tyrant and free his people. It was a brave attempt, but it was also doomed from the start. Frieza was far more powerful than the Saiyans had realized, and King Vegeta's rebellion was crushed in a matter of moments. The king himself was killed by Frieza with a single devastating blow. But Frieza didn't stop there. He had always been somewhat paranoid about the Saiyans. These brutal warriors with their ability to grow stronger after every battle, their potential for transformation, and the old legends that spoke of a Super Saiyan, a warrior of legend who appeared once every 1,000 years with power great enough to challenge even the gods. King Vegeta's rebellion confirmed Frieza's worst fears. The Saiyans were too dangerous to be allowed to live. And so, he made a decision that would echo through the decades to come. He would destroy them all. Frieza traveled to Planet Vegeta, and with a casual gesture, with no more effort than one might use to swat a fly, he destroyed the entire planet. Billions of Saiyans died in an instant, incinerated as their world exploded beneath Frieza's merciless attack. The Saiyan race, once proud conquerors who had terrorized countless worlds, were wiped out in a single moment of genocidal fury. Only a handful survived. Vegeta himself, who was off-world on a mission. Nappa and Raditz, who were with him. A low-class warrior named Kakarot, who had been sent to Earth as an infant, and a few others scattered across the galaxy. When Vegeta learned of Planet Vegeta's destruction, he was told it had been destroyed by a meteor strike, a cosmic accident. He didn't believe it, not entirely, but he also had no proof to the contrary. Deep down, in a place he refused to acknowledge even to himself, Vegeta suspected the truth. But what could he do? He was alone, surrounded by Frieza's forces, with nowhere to run and no one to turn to. So he buried his suspicions, buried his grief, buried everything soft and vulnerable inside himself, and he continued to serve. He continued to fight, to kill, to conquer. And with every battle, his power grew. With every victory, his pride swelled. And with every year that passed, the trauma of his childhood calcified into a shell of arrogance and ruthlessness that protected the wounded boy within. Young Vegeta became the perfect soldier, efficient, merciless, powerful, but he never stopped being a prince, never stopped reminding everyone around him of his royal blood, of his superiority. It was all he had left. His planet was gone. His father was dead. His people were extinct, but he was still the prince of all Saiyans. That title, that identity, became his anchor, the one thing that kept him from losing himself completely. And it also became his greatest weakness, the source of an ego so massive that it would take decades of defeat, humiliation, and hard-won wisdom to finally bring it under control. This was the Vegeta who would eventually come to Earth. a traumatized child soldier hiding behind a mask of princely arrogance, a warrior of immense power carrying wounds that no amount of strength could heal. He didn't know it yet, but his journey was about to take a turn that would challenge everything he believed about himself, about power, and about what it truly meant to be strong. The years between the destruction of Planet Vegeta and Vegeta's arrival on Earth were years of careful survival, wrapped in layers of carefully cultivated brutality. Vegeta was not simply a soldier in Frieza's army. He was a trophy, a pet, a living reminder to everyone who saw him that even the prince of the warrior race served at the Emperor's pleasure. Frieza never allowed Vegeta to forget this arrangement. Every interaction between them was tinged with subtle mockery, with reminders of who held the power and who was merely a useful tool. For a child raised to believe in his own superiority, raised to see himself as royalty destined to rule, this was a form of psychological torture that cut deeper than any physical wound. Vegeta learned to hide his rage, to swallow his pride when necessary, to present a face of cold professionalism while inside he burned with humiliation and fury. He watched as Frieza treated him like a curiosity, sometimes praising his strength and potential, other times reminding him with casual cruelty that he could be disposed of at any moment. It was a masterclass in psychological manipulation, and it left scars that would shape Vegeta's personality for decades to come. The Frieza Force was vast, comprising countless species from across the galaxy, all united under the banner of conquest and terror. Within this massive organization, there was a strict hierarchy. At the top sat Frieza himself, whose power was so overwhelming that even his strongest soldiers lived in constant fear of displeasing him. Beneath him were his elite forces, the Ginyu Force, a team of powerful and flamboyant warriors who served as Frieza's special operations unit, Zarbon and Dodoria, Frieza's personal attendants and enforcers, and countless other soldiers, scouts, and planet brokers who carried out the Empire's business across the universe. Vegeta occupied a strange position in this hierarchy. He was not part of the elite inner circle like Zarbon or Captain Ginyu, but he was also not treated like a common soldier. Frieza kept him close, assigned him important missions, and cultivated his abilities with an attention that might have seemed paternal if it wasn't so clearly manipulative. The Emperor seemed to delight in having the Saiyan Prince as his servant, in watching this proud warrior bow and scrape before him. It fed Frieza's massive ego to know that he had broken the spirit of an entire race and claimed their prince as his own. But Frieza had not broken Vegeta, not completely. Beneath the surface obedience, beneath the mask of cold efficiency, Vegeta's pride remained intact, burning like an ember that refused to be extinguished. He told himself that he was biding his time, that one day he would be strong enough to challenge Frieza, to avenge his people and reclaim his birthright. This belief became his sustaining fantasy, the secret hope that kept him going through years of servitude and humiliation. Every mission he completed, every planet he conquered, every enemy he destroyed was another step toward the power he would need to eventually face Frieza and win. The missions themselves were brutal and varied. Vegeta, along with Nappa and Raditz, would be sent to planets across the galaxy with orders to eliminate the native population so the world could be sold to the highest bidder. Sometimes they would face resistance. Inhabitants with enough power or technology to put up a fight. And these battles were the only times Vegeta felt truly alive. Combat was the one arena where he could express himself fully, where his power and skill were undeniable, where for brief moments he could forget that he was a slave and remember that he was a warrior. Between Vegeta and his Saiyan companions, there developed a strange dynamic. Nappa was older, more experienced, and had served Vegeta's father loyally. After the destruction of Planet Vegeta, Nappa transferred that loyalty to the young prince, treating him with a deference that acknowledged his royal status. But there was also a practical element to their relationship. Vegeta was stronger, more talented, and clearly favored by Frieza, which meant Nappa's survival was tied to maintaining that relationship. Nappa was no fool. He understood the politics of their situation and played his part accordingly. Raditz, on the other hand, was weaker than both of them, a mid-level warrior with none of the elite status that Vegeta and Nappa enjoyed. He was arrogant, always trying to assert dominance over weaker beings. But he knew his place in the pecking order when it came to his Saiyan companions. Raditz served as something of a scout and lower-ranking operative, handling less critical missions and generally trying to stay in the good graces of both Vegeta and the Frieza Force command structure. All three of them knew that their survival depended on being useful to Frieza, and so they remained ruthlessly efficient, carrying out every order without question, no matter how brutal or senseless it might seem. During these years, Vegeta's power grew considerably. Saiyans had a unique trait. They grew stronger after every battle, especially after recovering from near-fatal injuries. This ability, called Zenkai, meant that a Saiyan who survived a brutal beating would return stronger than before. Vegeta took advantage of this trait constantly, pushing himself to his limits in every fight, recovering and emerging more powerful. It became an obsession for him, this endless pursuit of strength, because he understood on some level that power was the only thing that mattered in Frieza's universe. Strength meant survival. Strength meant respect. And enough strength, he believed, would eventually mean freedom. But there was something else driving Vegeta as well, something he rarely acknowledged even to himself. He was lonely. The destruction of Planet Vegeta had left him without a home, without a people, without any real connection to anyone or anything. Nappa and Raditz were allies of convenience, not friends. Frieza's army was full of beings from countless species, but Vegeta felt no kinship with any of them. He was the last prince of a dead race, and that isolation weighed on him in ways he refused to examine too closely. So he channeled that loneliness, that grief, that desperate need for purpose into the one thing he knew how to do. He became stronger. Years passed. Vegeta grew from a traumatized child into a hardened young warrior. His power increased, his reputation grew, and his hatred for Frieza deepened with every passing day. He heard rumors sometimes, whispers about other Saiyans who might have survived, about the old legends of the Super Saiyan transformation, about Dragon Balls and wishes and other fantastical elements of the universe. Most of it he dismissed as nonsense, but some part of him, some small, desperate part, held onto these stories as possible paths to the power he needed. And then, finally, an opportunity presented itself. Vegeta learned through Raditz, who had traveled to Earth to recruit his younger brother and been killed for his trouble, about the existence of the Dragon Balls. These were magical artifacts that, when gathered together, could grant any wish. Raditz had transmitted information about them before his death, and Vegeta immediately saw the potential. If he could gather the Dragon Balls, if he could wish for immortality, he would have all the time in the universe to grow strong enough to defeat Frieza. With immortality, defeat would be temporary, death impossible. He could challenge the Emperor again and again, until finally, inevitably, he emerged victorious. This possibility consumed Vegeta's thoughts. He learned that Earth had Dragon Balls, and more importantly, he learned that there was another set on a planet called Namek. The wheels began to turn in his mind. He made plans, calculated possibilities, and for the first time in years, Vegeta allowed himself to hope. He would go to Earth, gather the Dragon Balls, wish for immortality, and finally, claim the power that was his birthright. What Vegeta didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that his journey to Earth would change him in ways that had nothing to do with power or immortality. He was walking into a series of events that would challenge every assumption he had about strength, about pride, and about what it truly meant to be a warrior. He was about to meet someone who would become his greatest rival, his most frustrating challenge, and eventually, though he would never admit it easily, something resembling a friend. The Saiyan Prince was about to arrive on Earth, and nothing would ever be the same. The journey to Earth was undertaken with cold calculation and absolute confidence. Vegeta, accompanied by Nappa, traveled through the stars in their attack pods, small spherical spacecraft that could cross vast distances of space. As they approached Earth, Vegeta's mind was focused entirely on the objective. Locate the Dragon Balls, eliminate any resistance, wish for immortality, and then leave this backwater planet behind. It was supposed to be simple. The planet's power levels were laughably low, according to the data Raditz had transmitted before his death. The strongest warrior on Earth, the one who had killed Raditz, had a power level of just over 1,000. Vegeta's own power level was 18,000. This would not be a battle, it would be an extermination. What Vegeta didn't account for was the growth potential of Earth's defenders, and more importantly, he didn't account for Goku. Kakarot, as Vegeta knew him by his Saiyan birth name, was Raditz's younger brother, a low-class Saiyan warrior who had been sent to Earth as an infant with orders to conquer the planet. But Kakarot had suffered a head injury as a child that had erased his Saiyan programming, leaving him gentle, kind, and heroic instead of brutal and conquering. He had grown up as Goku, raised by humans, and had become Earth's greatest defender. All of this was unknown to Vegeta as he approached Earth. He simply knew that a Saiyan was there, and that this Saiyan had somehow managed to defeat Raditz. Vegeta and Nappa landed on Earth with characteristic brutality. They had no interest in subtlety or diplomacy. They were there to conquer, and they announced their presence by immediately beginning to destroy everything around them. When Earth's defenders gathered to face them, a group of martial artists and warriors who had trained specifically for this invasion, Vegeta barely gave them a second glance. They were insects to be crushed, nothing more. The battle that followed was a massacre. Nappa handled most of the fighting initially, and he tore through Earth's defenders with terrifying efficiency. Yamcha, Tien, Chiaotzu, and Piccolo fell one by one, some killed instantly, others dying in desperate attempts to protect their friends. Vegeta watched it all with cold indifference, occasionally offering mocking commentary, but otherwise seeming bored by the entire affair. These weren't warriors. They were just obstacles to be removed. The real prize, the Dragon Balls, remained the focus of his attention. But then Goku arrived, having rushed back from training in the afterlife with King Kai. And everything changed. Vegeta felt Goku's power level the moment he appeared, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, the Saiyan Prince felt something other than boredom. Goku's strength had increased dramatically, far beyond what should have been possible in such a short time. He dispatched Nappa with relative ease, forcing Vegeta to step in and kill his own subordinate when it became clear Nappa was now useless to him. This casual murder demonstrated something important about Vegeta. Loyalty meant nothing to him if it wasn't accompanied by strength. Weakness deserved death, even if that weakness came from injury sustained in his service. Finally, Vegeta faced Goku directly, and the battle between them was unlike anything either had experienced before. Goku's power was impressive, and his techniques were strange and innovative. He used a powerful attack called the Kaioken that multiplied his power level several times over, pushing him temporarily into ranges that actually threatened Vegeta. The Saiyan Prince was shocked, infuriated, and for the first time in years, genuinely excited. This was a real fight, a real challenge. But excitement quickly gave way to rage when he realized that Goku, this low-class Saiyan, this nobody who should have been far beneath him, was actually keeping pace with him in battle. Vegeta's pride couldn't tolerate this. He was the prince of all Saiyans, an elite warrior with royal blood and years of combat experience. Goku was a low-class grunt who had grown up on a backwater planet with no knowledge of his heritage. And yet they were evenly matched. The humiliation of this realization drove Vegeta to escalate the battle dramatically. He created an artificial moon using a technique that allowed him to transform into a great ape. The massive simian form that multiplied a Saiyan's power tenfold. In this form, Vegeta was unstoppable, a mountain of rage and fur that demolished everything in its path. But even this wasn't enough. Through teamwork, clever tactics, and sheer desperate determination, Earth's remaining defenders managed to turn the tide. Gohan, Goku's young son, transformed into a great ape himself and crashed into Vegeta, breaking his spine and leaving him helpless. Krillin, Goku's best friend, stood over the defeated Saiyan Prince with a sword raised, ready to deliver the killing blow. This was it. Vegeta had lost, and he was about to die on this miserable planet, his dreams of immortality and revenge against Frieza dying with him. But then Goku, battered and broken but still conscious, told Krillin to spare him. He argued that Vegeta deserved a chance to leave, that killing him now would be dishonorable, and that maybe someday Vegeta could change. It was mercy, pure and simple, the kind of mercy that made no logical sense to anyone present, least of all to Vegeta himself. The prince was allowed to crawl back to his space pod and escape Earth, defeated, humiliated, and fundamentally shaken in a way he couldn't even fully process. As Vegeta fled Earth, healing in his recovery pod during the journey back into space, something began to change inside him. He had lost, truly lost, for the first time in his adult life. And he had lost to a low-class Saiyan, someone who by all rights should have been beneath his notice. The experience should have been crushing, should have destroyed his pride completely, and in a way it did. But it also planted a seed, a new obsession that would drive Vegeta for years to come. He had to become stronger than Goku. He had to surpass Kakarot. It wasn't about Frieza anymore, or at least not entirely. Now there was a new target, a new rival, a new standard against which Vegeta measured himself. The Saiyan Prince was about to embark on the next phase of his journey, and though he didn't know it yet, this rivalry with Goku would become the defining relationship of his life. It would push him to heights of power he never imagined possible, force him to confront truths about himself he had spent decades avoiding, and ultimately transform him from a ruthless villain into something far more complex and ultimately far more human. But first, he had to survive, and survival meant one thing. He needed the Dragon Balls, and he needed them now. Vegeta's journey to Namek was driven by desperation masked as determination. His defeat on Earth had been a wake-up call, a harsh reminder that despite his royal blood and years of training, he was still not strong enough to achieve his goals. The Dragon Balls represented his best chance at gaining the power he needed, not just to defeat Goku, but more importantly, to finally challenge and destroy Frieza. The thought of immortality consumed him during his recovery. With eternal life, he could train indefinitely, grow infinitely stronger, and even if he lost battles along the way, he would always return to fight again. It was the perfect solution, or so he believed. But Vegeta wasn't the only one heading to Namek. Word of the Dragon Ball's existence had reached Frieza as well, and the tyrant had his own reasons for seeking them out. Frieza desired immortality for the same reason Vegeta did. With eternal life, his reign would be absolutely unshakable. And so a race began, with multiple parties converging on the peaceful planet of Namek, each seeking the mystical Dragon Balls for their own purposes. The Namekians themselves, a peaceful and spiritual people, were about to become unwilling participants in a conflict that would devastate their world. Vegeta arrived on Namek ahead of Frieza, but discovered that the tyrant's forces were already there, scouring villages and murdering Namekians in search of the Dragon Balls. This presented both an opportunity and a danger. Vegeta could potentially steal the Dragon Balls from under Frieza's nose, but he would have to contend with Zarbon and Dodoria, two of Frieza's most powerful henchmen, beings whose strength had intimidated Vegeta for years. But something had changed. Vegeta's defeat on Earth and subsequent recovery had triggered the Saiyan Zenkai boost, making him significantly more powerful than he had been before. For the first time, he believed he might actually be strong enough to challenge Frieza's elite soldiers directly. His first real test came when he encountered Dodoria, the rotund and brutal pink warrior who had served as one of Frieza's enforcers for decades. Dodoria had just finished massacring a Namekian village and was pursuing Gohan and Krillin, who had also come to Namek seeking the Dragon Balls. Vegeta ambushed Dodoria with a vicious kick that sent the warrior sprawling. The look of shock on Dodoria's face was deeply satisfying to Vegeta. For years, he had endured mockery and casual cruelty from Frieza's henchmen, forced to accept their superiority because he lacked the strength to challenge them. Now, watching Dodoria realize that Vegeta had surpassed him, watching fear replace arrogance in those eyes, was a moment of pure vindication. The fight was brief and brutal. Dodoria attempted to use his bulk and raw power to overwhelm Vegeta, but the Saiyan Prince was faster, stronger, and infinitely more motivated. Every punch Vegeta landed was payback for years of humiliation. Every blast of energy was a statement of independence. When Dodoria realized he was outmatched and attempted to flee, Vegeta felt nothing but contempt. The warrior who had terrorized countless innocents, who had helped subjugate the Saiyan race, was now begging for his life. But before Vegeta killed him, he extracted information. Dodoria, desperate to survive, revealed the truth Vegeta had suspected for years. Frieza had destroyed Planet Vegeta. It wasn't a meteor strike or cosmic accident. It was genocide, pure and simple. Frieza had feared the growing power of the Saiyans and eliminated them. Vegeta's reaction to this revelation was complex. Part of him had always known, had always suspected the truth. But hearing it confirmed, understanding that his entire race had been exterminated not in honorable combat, but out of paranoid fear, stirred something dark inside him. He told Dodoria that he didn't care about the Saiyans, that what angered him was the years of servitude and abuse he had endured from Frieza and his subordinates. But this was partly a lie, a defense mechanism. Vegeta did care, more than he was willing to admit. The destruction of his race, the murder of his father, the extinction of his people, it all mattered. But acknowledging that pain, that grief, would have meant acknowledging vulnerability, and Vegeta's entire identity was built on suppressing such weakness. So he channeled his emotions into rage and killed Dodoria with a single energy blast, obliterating the warrior who had helped keep him enslaved for so long. Next came Zarbon, and this encounter proved far more challenging. Zarbon was everything Vegeta despised, refined, elegant, and condescending. He had always treated Vegeta with casual disdain, secure in his superior strength and position within Frieza's hierarchy. When they met on Namek, Zarbon was confident that defeating Vegeta would be simple. The battle began with Vegeta clearly holding the advantage, his increased power allowing him to dominate the exchange. But then, Zarbon revealed a secret. He possessed a monstrous transformation that dramatically increased his power. In this grotesque reptilian form, Zarbon was far stronger than Vegeta, and the fight turned into a one-sided beatdown. Zarbon pummeled Vegeta mercilessly, beating him through mountains and crushing him with overwhelming force. It was humiliating, reminiscent of his defeat on Earth, another painful reminder that despite his growth, he still wasn't strong enough. Zarbon left him for dead, broken and bleeding in the Namekian landscape. But Frieza had other ideas. The tyrant had Zarbon retrieve Vegeta's battered body and heal him in a medical tank, intending to extract information about the Dragon Ball's locations. This proved to be a catastrophic mistake. The healing triggered another Zenkai boost, increasing Vegeta's power dramatically. When Vegeta recovered, he betrayed Frieza, stole the Dragon Balls the tyrant had collected, and fled. Frieza sent Zarbon to retrieve both Vegeta and the stolen Dragon Balls, and the two warriors clashed again. But this time everything was different. Vegeta's power had increased so dramatically that even Zarbon's transformed state was no match for him. The prince systematically dismantled Zarbon's attacks, and when the warrior begged for mercy, Vegeta showed none. He drove his fist through Zarbon's stomach and finished him with an energy blast, sending Frieza's enforcer to the bottom of a Namekian lake. The symbolism wasn't lost on Vegeta. He had killed both of Frieza's primary henchmen, the two warriors who had represented his bondage and inferiority for so many years. He was breaking his chains, one link at a time. But Vegeta's victories were short-lived. Frieza called in the Ginyu Force, an elite team of 5 warriors who served as the Emperor's Special Operations Unit. These weren't mere enforcers like Zarbon and Dodoria. These were some of the most powerful beings in the universe, and their leader, Captain Ginyu, possessed a power level that dwarfed Vegeta's own. When the Ginyu force arrived on Namek, the atmosphere changed immediately. Their flamboyant poses and theatrical behavior belied their lethal efficiency, and Vegeta knew immediately that he was in serious danger. The battles against the Ginyu Force exposed Vegeta's limitations brutally. He managed to kill Guldo, the weakest member. But his fight against Rikume demonstrated the vast gap between his power and the elite soldiers. Vegeta threw everything he had at Rikume, unleashing powerful energy attacks that devastated the surrounding landscape. For a moment, it seemed like he might actually win. But Rikume simply laughed off the attacks and proceeded to brutally beat Vegeta into near unconsciousness. The prince was saved only by Goku's timely arrival, a fact that must have stung his pride terribly. Goku's appearance changed everything. The low-class Saiyan had trained on his journey to Namek and had grown absurdly powerful, strong enough to defeat the entire Ginyu force with relative ease. Vegeta watched in frustrated disbelief as Goku dismantled warriors who had nearly killed him. The gap between them, which Vegeta had hoped to close, seemed wider than ever. This frustration was compounded when Captain Ginyu used his body-switching ability to swap bodies with Goku, stealing his power. Eventually, through teamwork and cleverness, Ginyu was defeated and trapped in the body of a frog. But the damage to Vegeta's ego was done. Then came the final confrontation. Frieza himself. The tyrant had grown tired of the games and complications and decided to handle matters personally. What followed was a battle that pushed everyone to their absolute limits. Frieza revealed that he had been suppressing his true power all along, and even in his first form, he was stronger than anyone Vegeta had ever faced. The prince watched as his temporary allies, Gohan and Krillin, were beaten and tortured. He saw Piccolo arrive and merge with the Namekian warrior Nail, gaining immense power but still falling short of what was needed. And through it all, Frieza transformed, each new form revealing deeper wells of terrifying power. In desperation, Vegeta made an extraordinary request. He asked Krillin to nearly kill him so that he could receive healing and another Zenkai boost, hopefully gaining enough power to challenge Frieza. It was a calculated risk, born of absolute desperation. The plan worked in terms of increasing his power, but it still wasn't enough. When Vegeta confronted Frieza in the tyrant's final form, he was utterly outclassed. Frieza toyed with him, beating him casually while mocking his Saiyan pride. And then, something broke inside Vegeta. As Frieza pummeled him, as the pain and humiliation mounted, Vegeta began to cry. The proud prince, who had spent his entire life suppressing emotion and projecting invulnerability, broke down. He spoke to Goku, telling him about the Saiyans, about their subjugation, about how they had been forced to serve Frieza, about the destruction of their race. He begged Goku to defeat Frieza, to avenge the Saiyans, to accomplish what Vegeta himself could not. It was a moment of complete vulnerability, of absolute honesty, and it was tearing him apart even as the words left his mouth. Frieza killed him. A casual energy blast through the heart, and Vegeta collapsed, dying on the alien soil of Namek. His last words were about Saiyan pride, about his failure, about his pain. For a warrior who had defined himself entirely by strength and superiority, dying while weak and begging was the ultimate humiliation. But it was also strangely liberating. In those final moments, Vegeta was completely honest, perhaps for the first time in his adult life. He acknowledged his pain, his loss, his failure. He admitted that he cared about the Saiyans, that their genocide mattered, that Frieza's tyranny had wounded him in ways that went far deeper than any physical injury. Of course, death wasn't the end for Vegeta. The Dragon Balls of Namek were used to resurrect everyone Frieza had killed, bringing Vegeta back to life. He didn't witness Goku's transformation into a Super Saiyan or the defeat of Frieza. He was transported to Earth before the final battle concluded, but he learned about it afterward, and the knowledge that Goku, the low-class warrior, had achieved the legendary transformation that Vegeta believed should have been his by birthright was almost more painful than death had been. The Namek Saga represented a turning point for Vegeta. He had broken free from Frieza, achieved a level of independence he had dreamed about for years. But he had also been forced to confront his own limitations repeatedly. Every time he thought he had grown strong enough, someone stronger appeared. Every time he believed he had closed the gap with Goku, that gap widened. And most devastatingly, he had been forced to confront his own emotional vulnerability, to acknowledge that beneath the armor of pride and arrogance, he was still that traumatized child who had watched his world burn. The journey ahead would require him to grapple with these revelations, whether he wanted to or not. Vegeta returned to Earth fundamentally changed, though he would never have admitted it. The events on Namek had stripped away many of his illusions about himself and his place in the universe. He was no longer serving Frieza. His enslaver was dead, killed by Kakarot in a battle Vegeta hadn't been present for. That galled him more than he could express. The revenge he had dreamed about for decades, the confrontation that should have been his defining moment, had been claimed by someone else. And that someone else had achieved Super Saiyan, the legendary transformation of Saiyan mythology. The golden-haired warrior of immense power that appeared once every 1,000 years. Goku had reached heights that Vegeta, despite his royal blood and elite training, could not. This realization consumed him. Vegeta couldn't return to space, couldn't continue his old life of conquest and wandering. Instead, he remained on Earth, ostensibly because it was as good a place as any, but really because Goku was there, and Vegeta couldn't leave until he had surpassed him. He began training with an intensity that bordered on obsession, pushing his body and mind to their absolute limits. Every waking moment was dedicated to becoming stronger, to achieving Super Saiyan himself, to reclaiming the superiority that he believed was his birthright. It was during this period that Vegeta's relationship with Bulma deepened in ways neither of them fully understood or acknowledged. Bulma was brilliant, wealthy, and had a personality strong enough to match Vegeta's own. She didn't fear him, didn't treat him with the reverence he demanded, and for some reason that Vegeta couldn't entirely explain, he found this intriguing rather than infuriating. She offered him a place to stay at Capsule Corporation, and he accepted, partly for convenience, but partly for reasons he refused to examine. Their relationship was complicated from the beginning. Bulma was attracted to Vegeta's strength and intensity, while Vegeta seemed drawn to her spirit and the fact that she treated him like a person rather than a prince or a monster. They argued constantly, circling each other with a tension that was both antagonistic and undeniably charged with something else. For Vegeta, who had never experienced anything resembling a normal relationship, who had spent his entire life as either master or servant with no middle ground, this dynamic was utterly foreign. He didn't know how to process it, so he did what he always did. He buried himself in training and tried to ignore the growing connection. But he couldn't ignore it completely, especially when Bulma became pregnant. The revelation that he was going to be a father should have been terrifying to someone with Vegeta's background and emotional limitations, but instead, something shifted inside him. He didn't become soft or sentimental, didn't suddenly transform into a caring partner or attentive father-to-be, but the knowledge that he was creating new life, that he would have a son who carried Saiyan blood, touched something deep within him. It was a connection to the future, a link in a chain he had thought broken forever with the destruction of Planet Vegeta. Then, future Trunks arrived, a mysterious young warrior with lavender hair and a sword, and he brought terrible news. In his timeline, devastating androids created by Dr. Gero would appear in 3 years and kill all of Earth's defenders, including Goku. Only Trunks survived, sent back in time by his mother to warn everyone and hopefully change the future. When Trunks revealed to Vegeta privately that he was his son from the future, the prince's reaction was complicated. Pride that his bloodline would produce such a powerful warrior, confusion about the implications, and something else he wouldn't name, perhaps a flicker of paternal feeling, quickly suppressed. The revelation gave Vegeta new motivation for his training. He had 3 years to prepare for the androids, 3 years to achieve Super Saiyan, 3 years to surpass Goku. He trained with demonic intensity, pushing himself past every conceivable limit. His methods were brutal, often self-destructive, driven by an obsession that went beyond simple desire for power. This was about identity, about proving to himself and the universe that his royal blood meant something, that he was special, that he deserved to stand above others. And finally, after years of relentless effort, after countless failures and moments of absolute frustration, Vegeta achieved it. The transformation to Super Saiyan came not in battle, but during training, a moment of breakthrough where his power and his will aligned perfectly. His hair blazed golden, his eyes turned turquoise, and energy exploded around him in a golden aura that shook the ground. He had done it. He had achieved the legendary form. The feeling was indescribable. Vindication, triumph, and a satisfaction so deep it bordered on euphoric. He was finally on the same level as Kakarot, finally worthy of his title as Prince. When the androids finally appeared, Vegeta was ready, or so he believed. He confronted them with absolute confidence, eager to display his newfound power. The first android he faced went down easily, destroyed by Vegeta's overwhelming strength. This victory only inflated his already massive ego. But then he encountered Android 18, and everything changed. She was stronger than he anticipated, faster, with infinite energy that didn't deplete like his own. Their battle started with Vegeta holding his own, but as it continued, 18's advantages became apparent. She broke his arm with a devastating kick, and the pain was nothing compared to the humiliation of defeat. Once again, Vegeta had been proven insufficient. Once again, his pride had led him to underestimate an opponent. Once again, he was forced to confront the gap between his self-image and reality. The defeat stung terribly, but worse was yet to come. Cell appeared, a bio-android created by Dr. Gero that absorbed other androids to achieve perfection. Cell was a monster, a creature created from the cells of Earth's greatest warriors, including Vegeta himself. And Cell had a plan. Absorb androids 17 and 18 to achieve his perfect form. Vegeta trained in the hyperbolic time chamber, a mystical room where time passed differently, allowing a year of training in a single day. He emerged having achieved a new level beyond standard Super Saiyan, a form called Super Vegeta or Ascended Super Saiyan, where his muscles bulked slightly and his power increased dramatically. This new strength went to his head immediately. When he encountered Semi-Perfect Cell, who had already absorbed Android 17, Vegeta dominated the fight absolutely. He pummeled Cell with contemptuous ease, reducing the bio-android to a desperate, pleading wretch. And then, Vegeta made one of the worst decisions of his life. Cell begged for a chance to absorb Android 18 and achieve his perfect form, promising Vegeta a better fight if allowed to do so. Vegeta's pride, his arrogance, his desperate need to test himself against the strongest possible opponent made him agree. He allowed Cell to become perfect, even fighting off Trunks to prevent his son from stopping the transformation. It was an act of staggering arrogance born from a warrior's pride that valued the challenge of battle over pragmatic concerns like survival or protecting others. Perfect Cell was far stronger than Super Vegeta. The fight that followed was humiliating, with Cell casually dominating Vegeta and making it clear that the gap between them was enormous. Vegeta's moment of superiority, his brief time as the strongest warrior on Earth, evaporated in the face of Perfect Cell's overwhelming power. He had enabled the creation of a monster, and now that monster was beating him effortlessly. The psychological impact was devastating, but the true cost of Vegeta's arrogance came later. During the Cell games, when Cell challenged Earth's defenders to a tournament-style battle, future Trunks fought to protect his father and was killed by Cell with a single brutal attack. Vegeta watched his son die, watched the boy who carried his blood crumple lifeless to the ground, and something inside him shattered completely. For the first time, Vegeta understood loss in a personal, immediate way. This wasn't abstract genocide or distant tragedy. This was his son, his child, dead because of a monster that Vegeta himself had empowered. The grief and rage that consumed him were unlike anything he had experienced before. He attacked Cell in a blind fury, not caring about strategy or survival, just needing to hurt the being who had taken his son from him. Of course, the attack was futile. Cell swatted him aside easily, and Vegeta fell, broken and defeated once again. It was Gohan, Goku's son, who ultimately defeated Cell. The young half-Saiyan achieved Super Saiyan 2 during the battle and destroyed the bio-android with a massive Kamehameha wave. Vegeta contributed to the victory, distracting Cell at a critical moment to give Gohan the opening he needed. But even this small redemption felt hollow. He had failed as a warrior, failed as a father, failed in every way that mattered to him. The Cell Saga represented another crisis point for Vegeta. His pride had nearly doomed everyone, and his son had paid the price for his arrogance. Future Trunks was later revived by the Dragon Balls and returned to his own timeline, but the lesson remained. Vegeta was forced to confront the fact that his pride, the very thing he valued most about himself, was also his greatest weakness. It blinded him to reality, led him to make catastrophic decisions, and hurt people who didn't deserve it. For a man who had built his entire identity on being superior to others, this realization was profoundly destabilizing. In the years following Cell's defeat, Vegeta struggled with these revelations. He had a family now, Bulma and their son Trunks, a child version of the warrior from the future. He trained constantly, still driven to surpass Goku. But something had changed. He couldn't ignore his family completely, couldn't pretend they didn't matter. Trunks looked up to him with admiration and hope, and while Vegeta often seemed cold or dismissive, there were moments when his facade cracked, when he showed flickers of paternal care that surprised everyone, including himself. He was changing, slowly and painfully, into something more than just a warrior defined by pride and power. He was becoming a man with connections, with relationships, with responsibilities beyond himself. And while he fought against this transformation with every fiber of his being, while he told himself that he was still the prince who cared only about strength and superiority, the truth was that he was losing that battle. Love and connection were working their way into his heart, whether he wanted them there or not. But change for someone like Vegeta wasn't linear or easy. He would take steps forward and then retreat, would show vulnerability and then compensate with cruelty. The next major challenge he faced would expose this internal conflict in the most devastating way possible, forcing him to choose between the man he was becoming and the warrior he had always been. That challenge would come in the form of Majin Buu, and it would push Vegeta to the absolute breaking point. 7 years passed after Cell's defeat, 7 years of relative peace on Earth. For most of the planet's inhabitants, these were good years, prosperous and calm. But for Vegeta, they were years of internal conflict and mounting frustration. He had settled into something resembling a normal life with Bulma and their son Trunks. He lived at Capsule Corporation, trained regularly, and even participated in family activities, though always with a certain distance, always maintaining the emotional walls that protected him from vulnerability. On the surface, he seemed to have adapted. He was no longer the ruthless killer who had arrived on Earth years earlier. He had learned to coexist with humans, had formed something resembling friendships with the Z fighters, and had embraced fatherhood in his own awkward, emotionally stunted way. But beneath this veneer of domesticity, Vegeta was deeply troubled. The softness that had crept into his life bothered him profoundly. He felt like he was losing his edge, losing the cold warrior mentality that had defined him for so long. And most frustratingly, Goku remained ahead of him in power, a gap that Vegeta couldn't seem to close, no matter how hard he trained. When Goku returned to Earth for a single day to participate in the World Martial Arts Tournament, Vegeta's carefully suppressed frustrations exploded to the surface. He had trained for 7 years, maintained his discipline and focus, while Goku had been dead and training in the afterlife. And yet, when they finally faced each other again, Vegeta could sense immediately that Goku had surpassed him yet again. The gap between them, which should have narrowed, had instead widened. This realization was devastating to Vegeta's pride and sense of self. Then came Babidi, an alien wizard who sought to resurrect the ancient monster Majin Buu by collecting energy from powerful fighters. Babidi possessed the ability to corrupt and control beings, amplifying their power while bringing out their darkest impulses. When Babidi scanned Vegeta and found darkness in his heart, the wizard attempted to take control of him. But here's what made the situation so complex and tragic. Vegeta wasn't simply controlled against his will. He chose it. He allowed Babidi to corrupt him because the wizard promised increased power. And more importantly, because becoming Majin Vegeta offered an escape from the person he had been becoming. The transformation into Majin Vegeta was both physical and psychological. A magical mark appeared on his forehead. His eyes took on a more sinister appearance, and his power increased dramatically. But more than that, he felt liberated from the constraints of conscience and connection that had been weighing on him. As Majin Vegeta, he could reclaim the ruthless warrior identity he feared losing. He could stop caring about his family, stop worrying about being a good person, stop struggling with the internal conflict between the man he was and the warrior he wanted to be. His first act as Majin Vegeta was to murder innocent spectators at the World Tournament, killing dozens of people with a casual energy blast just to force Goku to fight him seriously. It was an act of pure villainy, a deliberate regression to the monster he had been when he first arrived on Earth. Goku was horrified, begging Vegeta to stop, to think about his family, to remember who he had become. But that was exactly what Vegeta was trying to escape. He didn't want to be the person who cared about such things. He wanted to be the prince again, the warrior for whom power was the only value that mattered. Goku reluctantly agreed to fight him, and they clashed while the threat of Majin Buu's resurrection loomed over everything. The battle between them was intense, brutal, and deeply personal. This wasn't about saving the world or stopping a villain. This was about Vegeta's desperate need to prove himself, to defeat Goku once and for all, to validate his entire existence. Every punch thrown was weighted with years of frustration, inferiority, and obsessive rivalry. Vegeta fought with everything he had, drawing on the power boost from Babidi's magic and his own considerable skill. During the fight, Vegeta laid bare his feelings in a way he never had before. He ranted about how Goku had always been ahead of him, how no matter what Vegeta accomplished, Kakarot somehow managed to surpass it. He spoke about his pride, about the humiliation of being second best, about the intolerable burden of constantly living in someone's shadow. It was raw, honest, and painful to witness. Vegeta was exposing the wound at his core, the fundamental insecurity that drove his every action. The fight ended ambiguously when Vegeta knocked Goku unconscious with a surprise attack, claiming victory. But it was a hollow triumph, achieved through deception rather than superior strength. And worse, Vegeta's actions had provided the energy needed to resurrect Majin Buu. The monster emerged, and it quickly became apparent that Buu was far more powerful and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The pink, childlike creature possessed devastating power and seemed nearly indestructible. As Vegeta watched the chaos unfold, as he saw the consequences of his selfishness and pride manifesting in this unkillable monster, something shifted inside him. Goku had been right. His obsession with their rivalry, his need to prove himself superior, had blinded him to what actually mattered. People were dying, the Earth was in danger, and it was his fault. He had enabled Buu's resurrection because he couldn't let go of his ego for 5 minutes to focus on the greater threat. The realization hit him with devastating force. Goku wasn't ahead of him because of superior genetics or cosmic luck. Goku was stronger because he fought for others, because he had connections and reasons beyond himself. Because he had embraced the very things Vegeta had spent years running from. Vegeta had believed that caring about others made him weak, that emotional connections were chains holding him back. But the truth was the opposite. His isolation, his refusal to fight for anything beyond his own pride, that was his true weakness. What happened next became one of the most defining moments in Vegeta's entire journey. He made a decision, perhaps the first truly selfless decision of his life. He would stop Majin Buu, even if it cost him everything. He knocked out Trunks, who had arrived to help, and had Piccolo take the boy to safety. Then Vegeta asked Piccolo a question that revealed how little he understood about redemption and morality. Would he see Kakarot in the afterlife? Piccolo's answer was crushing in its honesty. No, Vegeta would not go to heaven. The evil he had done, the lives he had taken, the decades of cruelty and murder meant his soul would be purified and cease to exist. There would be no afterlife for Vegeta, no second chances, no reunion with anyone. Vegeta accepted this with quiet dignity. He embraced Trunks one final time, a rare display of physical affection, and whispered to his unconscious son that he was sorry, that he loved him, that he hoped Trunks would grow up to be better than his father. It was the most honest, vulnerable moment of Vegeta's entire life, a complete shattering of his emotional defenses. Then he flew to face Majin Buu alone. The fight was brief. Vegeta unleashed everything he had, giving a small speech about how Buu was fighting a proud Saiyan Prince, a warrior who refused to yield. Then he used a technique called final explosion, detonating his own body and life force in a massive blast designed to obliterate Buu completely. The explosion was cataclysmic, turning everything in the surrounding area to ash. Vegeta's body disintegrated, leaving only stone fragments that crumbled to dust. He sacrificed everything, betting his existence on this final attack. But it wasn't enough. When the smoke cleared, Majin Buu regenerated from the scattered pieces of his body. The sacrifice, as noble as it was, had failed to accomplish its objective. Vegeta died believing he had saved everyone, but the monster survived. It was a tragedy in the truest sense, a moment of genuine heroism that still fell short of what was needed. Yet the sacrifice mattered enormously, not because it defeated Buu, but because of what it represented. Vegeta had chosen to die not for pride or glory, but to protect others. He fought not to prove he was the strongest, but because it was the right thing to do. For a man who had spent his entire life defined by selfishness and ego, this was revolutionary. He had finally understood what Goku had known all along. True strength came from fighting for something beyond yourself. Vegeta's story didn't end with his sacrifice. Through the mystical intervention of the Elder Kai and the Dragon Balls, he was eventually brought back to life to continue fighting against the still rampaging Majin Buu. His return came at a critical moment, when Buu had transformed into his most dangerous form, Kid Buu, and was threatening to destroy the entire universe. Vegeta fought alongside Goku against this ultimate threat, and during this battle, he finally came to terms with truths he had been avoiding for years. As Goku prepared the Spirit Bomb, a massive energy attack that required time and concentration to gather power from all living things, Vegeta bought him that time by fighting Kid Buu alone. He was hopelessly outmatched, beaten and broken repeatedly. But he kept standing up, kept buying precious seconds and minutes for Goku to complete the technique. During this beating, Vegeta had an internal monologue that represented perhaps his greatest moment of character growth. He acknowledged finally and without reservation that Goku was better than him. Not just stronger, but better. Better warrior, better person, better in every way that mattered. This admission, internal though it was, represented a complete transformation of Vegeta's worldview. His entire life had been built on the belief that he was superior, that his royal blood and elite status made him special. He had clung to this belief even as evidence mounted to the contrary, even as Goku surpassed him again and again. Admitting that someone was better than him, genuinely superior, should have destroyed Vegeta's sense of self. But instead, it liberated him. He didn't have to be the best anymore. He could simply be Vegeta, powerful and proud in his own right, without needing to measure himself against Goku constantly. When the Spirit Bomb was finally ready and Goku lacked the strength to push it toward Buu, it was Vegeta who gave the last of his energy to his rival, acknowledging that Goku was Earth's true hero and deserved to land the finishing blow. Together they defeated Kid Buu, saving not just Earth but the entire universe. And afterward, Vegeta made another admission that shocked everyone present. He wanted Goku to be reincarnated, to return somehow, so they could fight again someday. Not out of hatred or rivalry, but because fighting Goku made him better. It was the closest Vegeta could come to expressing friendship, this desire to continue their relationship through combat. The Buu Saga represented Vegeta's most complete transformation. He went from being controlled by his worst impulses to sacrificing himself for others, from denying his growth to accepting it, from seeing Goku as an obstacle to recognizing him as a companion. He didn't become soft or lose his edge. He remained proud, aggressive, and intensely competitive. But he learned to channel those traits towards something beyond pure selfishness. He learned that strength could coexist with caring, that pride didn't require isolation, that admitting someone was better than you didn't diminish your own worth. Years passed after Buu's defeat, and Vegeta continued to train relentlessly while also maintaining his family life. He had a daughter now, Bula, joining Trunks in the family unit he had built with Bulma. The dynamics had shifted considerably. Vegeta was still gruff and emotionally reserved, but there were moments of genuine affection and care that would have been unthinkable from the warrior who first arrived on Earth. He attended family gatherings, participated in celebrations, and even showed concern for his loved ones in ways that didn't revolve around combat. Then Beerus arrived, the god of destruction, and Vegeta's world was turned upside down once again. Beerus was an ancient being of unimaginable power, someone who could destroy entire planets on a whim, and who had the authority to erase worlds from existence if they displeased him. When Beerus came to Earth looking for the Super Saiyan god of legend and attended Bulma's birthday party, Vegeta found himself in an impossible situation. He knew that antagonizing Beerus could result in Earth's destruction. So, he swallowed his pride and did everything possible to keep the god of destruction happy, even going so far as to dance and serve food, actions that were deeply humiliating for someone of his disposition. But then Beerus slapped Bulma. The god of destruction had grown annoyed with the party and lashed out, striking Vegeta's wife. And something inside Vegeta snapped completely. In that moment, nothing else mattered, not Earth's survival, not the power difference between him and Beerus, not the rational understanding that attacking a god of destruction was suicidal. Someone had hurt his wife, and that was intolerable. Vegeta exploded with rage, his power surging to levels that shocked everyone present, and he attacked Beerus with a fury that actually made the god take him seriously for a moment. The attack failed, of course. Beerus was far too powerful to be seriously threatened by Vegeta at that stage. But the moment was significant for what it revealed about how much Vegeta had changed. He had spent the entire party suppressing his pride and ego to keep Bulma's celebration safe. He had endured personal humiliation to protect others, and when his wife was attacked, he threw all of that away instantly to defend her, even knowing it was hopeless. Love had made him irrational in the best possible way. He cared more about Bulma's dignity than his own survival. That was growth, profound and undeniable. The Battle of Gods crisis eventually resolved with Goku achieving Super Saiyan God and fighting Beerus to a standstill. But the incident introduced Vegeta to beings far beyond anything he had encountered before. Gods, angels, beings from other universes who made even the strongest mortals look like insects. This revelation reignited his competitive drive. If there were gods with godly power, then he would obtain that power too. He would master divine ki, transcend his mortal limitations, and reach heights that would have seemed impossible just years earlier. This ambition led to Vegeta training with Whis, Beerus's attendant and martial arts teacher. Whis was an angel, a being of even greater power than Beerus himself, and he agreed to train both Vegeta and Goku in the ways of divine ki and advanced combat techniques. The training was humbling. Whis treated both Saiyans as students who knew nothing, breaking down their techniques and rebuilding them from the ground up. He taught them about energy control, about conserving stamina, about fighting smart, rather than just fighting hard. Through this training, Vegeta achieved Super Saiyan Blue, a transformation that combined Super Saiyan with godly Kai. His hair blazed a brilliant blue, and his power reached levels that dwarfed everything he had accomplished before. He had become a Sir, God in all but name, a mortal who wielded divine power. It was intoxicating, this strength, and Vegeta threw himself into mastering it with characteristic intensity. Then Frieza returned. The tyrant who had enslaved Vegeta as a child, who had destroyed Planet Vegeta and murdered the Saiyan race, was resurrected by his surviving forces and came to Earth seeking revenge against Goku. For Vegeta, this was deeply personal. All the trauma of his childhood, all the years of servitude and abuse came flooding back. Frieza represented everything that had been taken from him: his planet, his people, his father, his dignity. When Vegeta finally got his chance to fight Frieza, the tyrant now in a new golden form matching the Saiyan's blue transformation, Vegeta dominated. He had surpassed Frieza completely, and he beat the Emperor with a methodical brutality that was deeply satisfying. Every punch was payback for years of trauma. Every kick was revenge for the Saiyan race. Vegeta was finally strong enough to make Frieza suffer the way he had suffered. But then pride interfered again. Instead of finishing Frieza immediately, Vegeta toyed with him, savoring the victory, prolonging the tyrant's humiliation. This gave Frieza an opportunity to destroy the Earth in a desperate act of spite. Only Whiz's ability to reverse time saved everyone. And it was Goku who landed the killing blow on Frieza, not Vegeta. Once again, Vegeta's inability to finish his enemy efficiently had cost him the victory he deserved. It was a harsh lesson about the dangers of letting emotion override pragmatism. Still, the Resurrection F incident represented closure for Vegeta in many ways. He had proven beyond any doubt that he had surpassed the monster who had enslaved him. Frieza was no longer a threat to him, no longer someone to fear. The chains of his childhood were truly broken, not just physically, but psychologically. He was free in a way he had never been before. The Tournament of Power represented perhaps the ultimate test of everything Vegeta had learned about himself and his approach to combat. When Zen-O, the supreme being who ruled over all universes, decided to hold a tournament where entire universes would be erased if their team lost, the stakes became literally universal. Vegeta wasn't fighting for pride or rivalry anymore. He was fighting for survival, for Earth, for his family, for everything he had built in his life. His motivation was crystal clear. He would not allow his universe to be erased because Bulma and his children lived there. During the tournament, Vegeta displayed growth in every aspect of his fighting. He worked with teammates, coordinated strategies, and even showed concern for other fighters from Universe 7. This was radically different from the lone wolf who had arrived on Earth decades earlier. He had learned that cooperation wasn't weakness, that fighting for others actually made you stronger, not weaker. His battles during the tournament showcased his evolution as a warrior. When he fought Toppo, a god of destruction candidate from another universe who wielded destructive energy similar to Beerus, Vegeta pushed himself to new heights. He broke through his limits and achieved a more evolved form of Super Saiyan Blue, a transformation born not from pride or desperation, but from his determination to protect his family. He defeated Toppo decisively, proving that his growth had made him strong enough to challenge even gods. The final battle against Jiren, the strongest mortal fighter in all the universes, required Vegeta and Goku to work together as true partners. Gone was the bitter rivalry that had defined their earlier interactions. They fought side by side, covering each other's weaknesses, coordinating attacks, trusting each other completely. When Vegeta could no longer fight, he gave the last of his energy to Goku. believing in his rival's ability to win. It was a moment of complete trust and partnership that would have been impossible for the Vegeta of earlier sagas. Universe 7's victory in the Tournament of Power affirmed everything Vegeta had become. He was still proud, still driven, still hungry for greater strength. But he channeled those traits in service of protecting others now. He had found a purpose beyond himself, and ironically, that selflessness had made him stronger than pure selfishness ever could have. After the Tournament of Power, Vegeta continued training with Beerus, and the God of Destruction began teaching him a different path from Goku's Ultra Instinct. While Goku's technique focused on moving without thinking, on perfect defense and evasion, Beerus taught Vegeta the philosophy of destruction. This culminated in Ultra Ego, a transformation unique to Vegeta that embodied the very concept of destruction itself. Ultra Ego operates on a principle that perfectly suits Vegeta's aggressive fighting style. The more damage he takes, the stronger he becomes. It's a form that thrives on the thrill of battle, on pushing through pain, on refusing to back down no matter how dire the situation. Where Ultra Instinct requires calmness and emotional detachment, Ultra Ego feeds on emotion, aggression, and the primal joy of combat. It's perfectly suited to who Vegeta is at his core. During the Granola arc, Vegeta displayed this new form in battle, and also confronted elements of Saiyan history that forced him to grapple with collective guilt. Learning that the Saiyans had committed genocide on Granola's planet under Frieza's orders, Vegeta acknowledged the sins of his race and took responsibility for them in a way that showed tremendous maturity. He didn't make excuses or deflect blame. He simply accepted that the Saiyans, himself included, had done terrible things. But the arc ended with a shocking revelation. Black Frieza. The tyrant had trained in a hyperbolic time chamber for 10 years and achieved a new transformation that made him exponentially more powerful than either Goku or Vegeta. He defeated both Saiyans effortlessly, demonstrating that despite all their growth, despite achieving godly forms and training with angels and gods of destruction, there were still heights they hadn't reached. This should have been devastating for Vegeta, a return to the crushing inferiority that had defined his earlier life. But his reaction was different now. Instead of rage or despair, he simply acknowledged that he needed to train more, to grow stronger, to continue on his path. He wasn't defined by being the strongest anymore. He was defined by the journey, by the constant push to improve, by the relationships he had built and the people he protected. Black Frieza was just another challenge, another mountain to climb. Today, Vegeta stands as one of the universe's most powerful warriors, but more importantly, as one of its most complex and fully realized characters. He's a devoted father to Trunks and Bulla, showing genuine affection, even if he expresses it awkwardly. He is a partner to Bulma, though their relationship remains contentious and passionate in equal measure. He is a protector of Earth, a member of the Z Fighters, and a warrior who fights for others as much as for himself. His rivalry with Goku has evolved into something that can only be described as friendship, though Vegeta would likely never use that word. They push each other to greater heights, trust each other in battle, and maintain a competitive edge that drives both of them forward. It's the most important relationship in Vegeta's life besides his family, and it has shaped him more profoundly than any other single factor. The emergence of new threats like Black Frieza and the continued growth of other fighters like Beast Gohan means Vegeta's journey is far from over. There are still heights to reach, battles to fight, limits to break. But the difference now is that Vegeta understands what he's fighting for. It's not about being number one or proving his superiority. It's about protecting the life he's built, the people he loves, and the universe that has become his home. Vegeta's path has been one of the most remarkable character arcs in anime history. From genocidal villain to complex anti-hero to genuine protector, he has traveled a distance that cannot be measured in power levels or transformations. He learned that strength without purpose is hollow, that pride without humility is brittle, that isolation is weaker than connection. He learned to be a father, a partner, a friend and a hero, all while never losing the essential edge that makes him Vegeta. The Saiyan Prince without a kingdom found something better, a family, a home and a purpose worth fighting for. His journey from slave to warrior to man is a testament to the possibility of growth, the power of redemption, and the idea that who you are isn't determined by where you came from, but by the choices you make along the way. Vegeta chose to grow. He chose to change. And in doing so, he became not just powerful, but genuinely great. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Vegeta's incredible journey through Dragon Ball history, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Sleep with Dragon Ball Lore. Your support helps me create more comprehensive content, exploring the rich history and characters of this amazing universe. Let me know in the comments what aspect of Vegeta's character resonated most with you, or which other character you'd like me to cover next. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be as epic as the battles we've explored tonight.